Okay, so we are looking at the rules for multiplying with decimal points. When you're multiplying with decimal points, it's still the same way as if you're multiplying with whole numbers. First, you need to rewrite the problem and line them up. Nothing really has to line up, but I always like to line up the last digit. I usually also put the number that has the most digits in it on top and the one with the smaller amount in the bottom row. It does not matter, but for some reason that visually that just looks better to me. The second step says multiply like normal. So we're kind of ignoring the decimal point at this point. We're just multiplying as if they were just whole numbers. Don't remove the decimal point cell. Don't forget to add your zeros or x's for fillers like we did when we practiced multiplying with whole numbers. Step 3, when you get your answer, this is when we're going to go back and look at our decimal points. We're going to go back and count how many numbers are behind each decimal point in the first column and the second. Now, you're not always going to have a decimal point in both rows, but you still want to look at both of them in case you do. You still need to count both of them. Step 4, the number just counted is going to be how many times you move your decimal point to the left in your final answer. So that's after you got done adding everything up and you got your total number. When you add everything up and you get your total number, initially it looks like a whole number. And with all whole numbers, there is a decimal point. It's just located at the very end of it, so to the far right. So when you move your decimal point back to the left, you need to add it first at the end and then start moving it. So now that we kind of reviewed the rules, we're going to start practicing some of them. So let me grab color. Anytime while I'm doing this, scroll up, look at the rules up here if you need to peek at them. So the first problem says 34.2 times 3. So I have a decimal point, so I need to make sure I follow my decimal rules. So first step says rewrite it. So I'm going to write 34, make my decimal, 34.2, and it's times 3. Okay, and I just usually line up the last digits. All right, the next rule said multiply like normal. 3 times 2, I have 6. 3 times 4, I have 12. So put the 1s, carry the 10s. 3 times 3 is 9, plus the 1 is 10. Okay, so if these were whole numbers, that would be my final answer. But if we look back here, I have a decimal point. So if you have a decimal point when you're multiplying, then you know you're going to have a decimal somewhere in your final answer. And this is what we normally do. We look at each row. So I would draw an arrow. How many numbers are behind this decimal point? 1. How many behind this one? Well, I don't have any, so I have a 0. I still want you guys to look at both. I don't want you just to be in a habit of counting the top, because sometimes there is one on the bottom. So this 1 right here represents how many times I need to move my decimal back in my final answer. Right now I don't have 1, so it's always located here. But I need to move it 1 time to the left. So actually it's going to be right here. So my final answer for number 1 is 102.6. Okay? Remember, if the decimal is placed somewhere else, the answer would be wrong. So let's look at problem number 2 and follow these rules. Let me change my color up. All right, so I have 0.63 times 1.1, following the rules. I'm going to rewrite my problem. Numbers do not need to line up. That decimal is pretty ugly, but we're going to go with it. Okay, so multiply like normal. 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 6 is 6. Okay, I'm done with this one, and I'm moving to my second number. Now remember, we're ignoring the decimal point right now. We're not going to worry about them to the end. So this second one is actually in the 10 spot. And that's where we still have to follow our rules with our zeros or fillers. So before I start multiplying that second number through, I need to put an X because I need to start in the 10 spot. So 1 times 3 is 3, and 1 times 6 is 6. Okay, and then I'm going to add them up. 3 plus 0 is 3. 6 plus 3 is 9. And then 6 plus 0, nothing's above there, is 6. This is not my final answer because I have decimals up here, so I know there's going to be decimal points somewhere in the answer. Okay? So the rule said I need to go back and look at each row, put my arrows, and count how many numbers are behind each decimal point. I have 2 here. I have the 6 and the 3, so 2. I only have 1 here, so that is a total of 3. So that represents how many places I need to move my decimal to the left. Right now I don't have one, so it's always at the end. So 1, 2, 3. So my answer for number 2 should be 0.693. It's an ugly 3, but that's a 3. Okay? So with those rules, let's look at problem number 3. All right. Let's see, I have 3.4 times 0.8. Okay, so I'm going to line up my numbers. 3.4 times 0.8. All right. Multiply like normal, so 8 times 4 is 8, 16, 24, 32. Put my 2. Carry my 3. 8 times 3 is 8, 16, 24, plus the 3 is 27. Okay, now the next rule says I need to go back, count how many decimal spots I have. So I'll look at the first row, I need to look at the second row. First row I have 1 number behind the decimal point. Second row I have 1 number behind that decimal point, which makes a total of, I add them up, 2. So that means I need to move my decimal 2 spots in my answer. Right now there is none, so I put it at the end, and then I move it. That's an ugly 2, so 1, 2. That's where it should go. So my final answer for number 3 should be 2.72. If the decimal is somewhere else, your answer would be wrong. So it's very important you take your time when moving that. And the last problem we're going to look at is number 4. That's 42.15 times 1.2. First rule, multiplying is rewrite your problem. 1, 5 times 1.2, 1.2. Okay. Multiply the ones position through. Let me change my color. I have 2 times 5 is 10, so 0, carry the 1. 2 times 1 is 2, plus the 1 is 3. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 4 is 8. Okay. So I'm going to move on to multiply my second position. Now remember, ignoring the decimal, second position's in the 10 spot. So I need to make sure I put a filler, a 0 here. I need to start my answer in the 10 spot. And cancel this out because that went with the 2. So 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 2 is 2. I'm lining up my numbers. And 1 times 4 is 4. Okay, so done with both numbers, so I'm going to add them up. So this row I have 0. I have 8 here. I have 4 plus 1 is 5. I have 8 plus 2 is 10, so 0, carry the 1. 4 plus 1 is 5. Okay, I had decimals in my problem, so I need to reflect that in my answer. So I need to go back, draw my arrow this way, and count in each row how many numbers were behind each decimal. So I had 2 here. I had the 1 and the 5 behind the decimal, so that's 2. And I had 1 here that had the 2, so 1. That's a total of 3. So I need to move my decimal 3 spots back in this answer. I don't have one, so it's always located at the end, so move it 3 times. 1, 2, 3. So my answer for number 4, I'll kind of write it over here, is 50. point, it's a decimal, 5, 8, 0. You don't really have to reflect that 0, but if it's there, I might as well. So we just did 4 practice problems and covered the rules for how to multiply when you have decimal points.